Yeah, I hope you all will reveal all sorts of cool things that you're working on together. Um, as much as possible, let's focus on the now and the future.
Yeah.
One minute, guys. Okay, it's showtime. Welcome to the 16th episode of The Smartest People in the Room. If you've been following this series, you understand what we are doing, celebrating incredibly smart, accomplished music industry executives sharing their stories of their careers, their lives, and anecdotes about their past, present, and future. And if you've been paying close attention, you've also seen me broadcasting my portion of these events from some very interesting rooms. Today, we've nailed that on all counts. Before we get started, let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. Also, please submit any questions you'd like for Bryan and Jonathan to address during their conversation. We will be responding to as many of those as we can. I'd like to thank our sponsors for their support of this event, for without their help and money, we couldn't do what we do. Thank you to First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, Four Roses Bourbon, Fairlane Hotel, Core Power Yoga, Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and also Organics. Thank you to all of them. So let's get this party started. Today, I'm coming to you from one of Nashville's coolest and most unique music venues, Marathon Music Works. Originally built in the early 1900s as an auto manufacturing plant, Marathon Music Works opened its doors in 2011 as a concert and event venue. With a standing room capacity of over 1,700, it has quickly become Nashville's most prominent mid-sized independent venue. Fun fact about this place, the very last music event I attended before the pandemic was the Tornado Relief Concert that took place here on March 9th. The last time I was in this room, it was packed with 2,000 people elbow to elbow, and man, do I miss those days. I know you all do. By the way, that event was produced by Radio Lightning, the greatest radio station on earth, and it also happens to be housed in this very cool campus next door. This is a campus of old buildings actually called Marathon Music Works. Another cool thing I want to make you aware of, Marathon Music Works just launched a large-scale hashtag Mask Now, Party Later campaign that is encouraging everyone to wear a mask and follow CDC guidelines so we can safely bring back live events sooner than later. It has grasped the attention of agents, artists, promoters, etc., to rally around and create change. Most recently, the Titans, the Predators, Bridgestone Arena, Nissan Stadium, the Ryman Auditorium, and Ascend Amphitheater have also joined the effort. The stated purpose of this initiative is not for any type of personal gain, but for the universal understanding of this public health issue. We believe that we are not only responsible as individuals, but as an industry to encourage proper behavior and responsibility. In our lifetime, we have experienced substantial change, whether it was installing metal detectors, undergoing specialty training, such as active shooter and AHA first aid, and more in order to move forward safely as a community. You can support the Marathon Music Works by purchasing merch and some really cool, rare old posters at marathonmusicworks.com. They've got shirts, dad hats, bandanas, koozies, and even masks. We'd like to thank everyone for their support during this time, and remember the hashtag #MaskNowPartyLater. Please support this effort. And now to our featured guests. These two are longtime friends and collaborators. One I've known for years and actually placed into a great job at Sound Exchange back in 2008. The other I have admired, respected, and even stalked online for some time. Both are gifted A-list music executives and have a Rolodex of A-list clients to prove it. And today they are our guests on the smartest people in the room. First, Bryan Calhoun has 25 years of experience at the nexus of technology, music, and business. As a member of the industry relations team at music streaming giant Pandora Media, Bryan helps artists, labels, and managers maximize their opportunities on the platform. Always the artist advocate, he created the Music Business Toolbox, which is a box and a set of tools, a book and a set of tools to empower musicians with actionable advice on navigating the complexities of the music industry. The Music Business Toolbox is the required text in music business courses at several universities, including Kennesaw State University's Joel A. Katz Music and Entertainment Business Program, where Bryan is also an executive in residence. He provides digital strategy to management powerhouse Maverick Blueprint Group for their superstar clients, including G-Eazy, The Roots, Jill Scott, Trippie Redd. Additionally, he works with Lil Wayne and Young Money Records, TIG Records, and Brandy. Past clients have included Kanye West, T.I., Nicki Minaj, Drake, and many more. He's worked with labels, Relativity at Sony, R.E. Red, and Warlock, and he ran industry relations for Sound Exchange, which collects and distributes digital radio streaming royalties to artists and labels. He's a frequent speaker at music industry conferences and is a voting member of the Recording Academy. Bryan, it is such a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for coming.
Thanks,
and
Brad.
joining Bryan in the room today is Jonathan Azu. For reasons bigger than the music, and after years of driving success for some of the industry's most iconic artists and brands and companies, Jonathan left an executive role at entertainment powerhouse Red Light Management to start management firm Culture Collective. With a focus on clients of color, Culture Collective is driving change within the industry while representing creatives who are redefining their culture. While providing its clients with the services to build their careers, Culture Collective is also exemplifying and promoting diversity and inclusive leadership in entertainment, which is greatly lacking in most music companies today. As Jonathan stated in his Variety Magazine 2019 Inclusion Impact Report interview, I want to build a company that has diversity and inclusion as its mission. It's important because without it, our culture's narrative could also be lost or mistold. Prior to forming Culture Collective, Azu, a two-time Billboard 40 Under 40 power player, was Executive Vice President and General Manager of Red Light Management, EVP of Operations and Business Development for Superfly Presents, and was VP of Music Partnerships for CBS Radio. He's a graduate of Drake University and currently serves as a board trustee. In his career, Jonathan has overseen the development of many notable artists and brands, including Anita Baker, Emily King, Corey Henry, Luke James, Michelle Williams, Miguel, Cool and the Gang, Lecrae, Leon Thomas. Also, Outside Lands Music Festival, Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival, and many more. Please welcome these two music industry rock star executives to this version of the smartest people in the room. Take it away, boys.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
As I said in my post, I feel like more like the luckiest guy next to the smartest guy in this room, next to two smartest guys in this room. Thanks, I should say.
Man, please. I think I said something similar. It's like, you know, they say, you know, if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find a different room. Well, I don't have to leave this room, man. As long as you're here, I'm gonna stay in it, so I can. You can always put me up. You always put me up on game, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and I was trying to think when we were asked to do this when we first connected, and it's one of those things where we've been friends for so long that I can't even quite place where we connected. I think you may have been at Sound Exchange, but my favorite memories of our relationship have been sitting at the Four Seasons at South by Southwest in Austin, and I'd see you in the lodge, in the lobby bar around happy hour time, and we'd be recapping our day. Well, who'd you meet with?
Yeah.
Who'd you meet with? What interesting thing have you seen? What conversations are you hearing? Like, what's the cool technology platform out there? So I always appreciated that about you, that you were just so tapped into what's next.
Yeah, man, and likewise. I think it's you know, I like to be around people who are you know, inquisitive, you know, and really looking to try to sort of like, you know, always trying to continue to crack the code. You know, I mentioned I did a conversation that was posted yesterday for Jason Jeter, was TI's manager, business partner on a lot of stuff. He has something, a cool initiative called Heavy Sound Labs. And, you know, we were talking, and, you know, I still, you know, when people refer to me as, you know, as an expert or whatever, I still sometimes I'm like, man, but you know, there's so much more to learn still all the time, that like, I sometimes kind of, you know, feel maybe a little bit uncomfortable with that term, just because, you know, dude, every time I talk to you, you teach me something new. So I appreciate it. And I'm sure, and there's also lots of people who are like on this call, and you know, right now too, who are also really smart, plugged in people. So I'm really glad that you know, to have this opportunity, and appreciate Tom for putting this together and taking something and transitioning from the real world into the virtual world, which is a lot of what we've been having to do. And I think that really kind of, you know, that's a great way to sort of, you know, start this part of the conversation. You know, Jonathan, you know, what are you doing, and what are you seeing needs to be done in order to be able to help push the careers of your clients forward in this time?
It's interesting because it's this whole thing, the COVID and all the other things happening in the world, but ultimately COVID took us by surprise. And I think, you know, we always kind of have this like pre-COVID, post-COVID book.
Yeah.
You know, timestamp in our heads, and I had artists in Asia at the time, and I had tours that were getting ready to go out, and you know, we had to readjust very quickly of what we were going to do. And now that we're looking at the rest of the year, right, even into top of next year, I think we can all comfortably say we at least we know what we're dealing with, and we need to now navigate around it. Today is the first day of school for my young child, and it's been much smoother than, you know, going online than it was last semester, where it was like, oh, what are we going to do? We got to get these kids online, right? So now it's about what you want to do at that time. So that's what I've been stressing to my artists and colleagues is, you know, use this time wisely to plan around knowing what we can all kind of predict the world is going to look like. And I think from an artist perspective, you know, it's important to continue that engagement with fans. And, you know, without that, there's going to be a void when this slowly starts to come back on. We all know that's going to be a deliberate kind of turning on of the light switch. It's not going to be a quick flip, right? But once it's back on and we're able to tour again, artists that have used this time to think about how they mine data, how they create unique and interesting ways to engage with their fans, those fans will be the first to be in line to buy a ticket to go to a concert, or to go to some other promotional activity that an artist is involved in.
Yeah. So, yeah, one of the things we were talking about in advance of this is looking at different sort of levels of artists and how they're able to handle it. So if you are a smaller artist that primarily focuses on touring, that's much different than if you're a superstar artist that has the ability to at least continue to record and release music, even though you're not necessarily touring. So like, what are some specific things that you're doing, and maybe even talk a little bit about the Sunday brunch thing that you're doing? I think that would be, it's just because I'm seeing the same thing, right? Like, it's like the way some indie artists and like super small DIY artists are dealing with it is very different than the way superstar artists are, who may not necessarily even want to tour when things are normal. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because those top 5% of the artists, if you will, yeah, I mean, they can stay engaged with their fans by just continuing to put out music and do things that are interesting through social media platforms, and they're going to create the noise. It's all work, right? I mean, Cardi B dropped a massive record, last week, and, she's Cardi B, but that, there's real work that went into making sure that thing can have the impact that it did. But ultimately, the 95% of the other artists that really have to think through how they can engage with their fans in a way that's meaningful, that's the overall majority of artists that are out there. So you were mentioning the Sunday Brunch series. So Corey Henry, who's an artist that I work with, who's really a global artist. I mean, Corey does touring all around the world currently. Right now, today, we should be in Europe on a package with Lenny Kravitz doing arenas. Instead, he's here in California. And when COVID hit, he really wanted to, like most artists, just perform live. And we were lucky enough to have a relationship with Bob Clearmountain, the famous studio engineer who owns Apogee Electronics, and they have a performance space in their facility where they produce gear, and they were able to be deemed as a essential business because they produce gear, microphones there for artists. So we set up shop over there, just Corey and his drummer, and we started broadcasting at no cost on Sundays, just like the revival, which basically is just inspired gospel hymns. Corey has a funk soul band, but he plays organ and his drummer plays drums. So we got together and wanted to give this to people on Sundays as a platform to really kind of take a departure from all the crazy things that are happening in the world. And it started to really pick up steam where every Sunday we were doing it. And I had this thing that I often talk about, which is regular season and Super Bowls.
Yeah.
And that every artist, even before COVID, you want to have a regular season. You want to have the ability to be serving up content to your fans on an ongoing basis. And they, in their heads, they know they can go to a certain destination, whether that be YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, IG, or all of them, where they know they can be serviced up content from the artist, right? But you also want to create those Super Bowl moments. So in the case of Corey on Sundays, it became a regular season thing. It was like every week we were performing there, and you could check us out on a variety of different platforms. At the same time, we also are planning a Super Bowl moment around the release of more music from him later this year, which will be a much larger promoted event that we're probably going to be attaching some digital manifestations of meet and greets and stuff like that as a part of it. So it's really kind of reimagining it all and thinking through, what are the things that I used to do in the real physical, tangible world touring? How can those things be reimagined for digital?
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to ask you about that. I think that analogy is fantastic. There's another theory that I wanted you to touch on. It's because it relates to creating these connections with fans, but growing them, and that's your theory of the plus one. Could you?
Yeah, the plus one. I think the one thing, when people say, "Well, what do you do?" and it's like I'm a manager, and Bryan will say, he's a manager, marketer, but I think at the end of the day, I consider myself a strategist, and I think Bryan would probably say the same. Like, we think about how do we strategically get our clients from point A to point B, and then look at growing their audience size. And I believe in this theory around funnel marketing, which basically, if you just take a funnel, right? And that bottom portion of the funnel, which is the tube part, those are the core fans. Those are the fans that will ride for you. And you've got to really secure those fans, because ultimately they're the ones that, through the peaks and valleys of your career, will always be there for you. They're the ones that are first in line to buy pre-sales. They're the first to make comments on social media platforms. And you really got to always service that core. And that core is, again, who will carry you through your career. But part of the strategy is, how did I get more people into the funnel, right? And there's more room at the top than there is at the bottom. You'll have more passive fans than you will core fans of your career. So I think a lot about, how do I get more people into that funnel? And those people that you kind of throw into the top of the funnel are the plus ones. And they're the, they're the fans that maybe familiar with the music, know the artist by name, can't always match song with artist, and would go to a show if they were going with somebody that was a core fan. And that's how you grow it, right? That plus one that goes with the friend to a show and says, wow, I really do like this artist. This is really great. I'm in. I'm going to become a core fan. So that's the whole exercise around that whole plus one funnel marketing strategy.
Yeah, see, that's why you're the smartest guy in the room, right? Like taking these things that are like, basically coalescing something into something concise that gives you the ability to communicate, like, here's a theory, or here's an idea or a strategy. And I think that's that it's funny, you can say something in that very brief amount of time, but it means a lot. And that's something that comes from like years of experience. And so I appreciate you sharing that with me. And it's kind of one of the things like that. And, you're talking about the Super Bowl and, the regular season games. Those are like analogies and things that I take and, are now part of like my battery of tools when I'm thinking about developing strategies. So,
but the hard part is, how do you activate against it? Right. So, and I think you're one of the best at it. Like, how do I take data that's been aggregated from folks that bought tickets, and how do you retarget? Because that, to me, to be honest with you, and you've said this for a long time, you should be building up your own text message database. You should be building up your own email database. And how, because we were discussing this at one point in time, about, how do you define, so this is a question for you, how do you define digital marketing? A lot of people define it as just posting stuff on socials, right? And then that's it.
Yeah. So that's actually been something that has been very frustrating for me as someone who does digital strategy. There's definitely I find a disconnect between people who really know what digital marketing is and the majority of artists, labels, managers that are out there. And I'm talking about people who are, big, some pretty big managers, pretty big labels as well, where they, just as you said, they really think about digital marketing as organic posts on socials, mostly Instagram and TikTok dancers, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really where it ends. And I had an experience with a client not too long ago where a friend of mine was managing this artist, and he was looking for some support in digital marketing, and asked me to review some proposals from some, quote unquote, digital marketing agencies. And looked at the proposals, and lots of pretty pictures, and they looked great. And when I ultimately got on the phone and talked to these people and started like walking through like what they actually would do, it was, they would make posts. That was really it. They would make posts, and they would work with an influencer agency separately. Like, it wouldn't even be them. It would, like, work with an agency to go get people to make posts on Instagram and TikTok. And that was really the extent of it. And when I think about digital marketing, I really break it down into like these sort of like core components, especially if you're thinking about the release of a record. So you have what you're doing with the DSPs, right? So all the DSPs. Then you have what are you doing with respect to the social platforms, social channels, the Facebooks and the Twitters and Instagrams, and YouTube sort of crosses the line between a DSP and a social channel, right? They're sort of sit in the middle of it. How are you building? We were talking, data, like collecting data, right? But then making that data actionable So how are you collecting email addresses, cell phone numbers, getting people to be able to retarget so that you can then run an advertising campaign? So those are like sort of like the big sort of, I think, buckets that you need when you're thinking about a digital marketing campaign. You need to put things in those categories. And, quite frankly, it can be whether you're talking about a tour, a festival, so whatever, some kind of live experience, a new release of music, selling merch. I mean, there's things across all, you need to address those things on all of them. And they all sort of work together. And in the digital marketing, whoever sort of is heading your digital marketing, you need to, you need to be coordinating your efforts with the other members of the team. So obviously the publicist and the manager and the label, if they're involved, to the level that they're involved. But I have found, unfortunately, that a lot of people don't think about it in that way. And the same client, his label was, sort of, talking about the success that they've had using this very well-known ad agency, running ads for them for their video. And as I started getting into the details of it, I mean, it looked great from the surface, right? It was like, oh man, they've got, 10 million views of this video. And I was like, well, how much are you paying for this? And they're running TrueView ads, and like, what's the average time watch? All these things look good. But then as I start getting into then I asked the key question. I said, well, what territories are these streams coming from? And now this is a hip hop artist in the US, right? Core audience is definitely US. And the number one market was India. It was like India, the Philippines, and Brazil. So even though they were paying, a penny or a fraction of a penny per stream, it didn't matter. It was a vanity metric that, it's like, oh wow, we get to say we've got millions of streams, but it was bots in Asia that were watching the video. And unfortunately, I've seen too many people either get taken advantage of it because they don't know, or they misplace their focus on something that doesn't really matter. Because, the $10,000-$15,000 that they spent, getting fake spins, they could have spent selling merch. And if you run an effective merch campaign with the agency that, you work with, and I work with this agency that I really like. There's a couple of them I work with that I really like. One recently I've been working with is a company called Indiepreneur. But I've run campaigns where I'm seeing ROAS, return on ad spend, which is a good metric to look at. And you spend $1, how much money do you make in sales? Man, I'm seeing $10, $12, $15, $16 ROAS. And if you take that and if you instead of getting $10,000 worth of bot spins and apply it to these other meaningful metrics, you could, or meaningful initiatives, that's really what you should be doing. So anyway, it's a very frustrating thing. And also going back to looking at sort of like the elite artists and the top artists, comparing them with the some of the smaller artists. When Lil Wayne has a record coming out, or G-Eazy has a record coming out, I know that I can rely on Republic for Wayne or RCA for G-Eazy, because they've got infrastructure in place and people who have the relationships with the DSPs. They have the knowledge. I can talk to them about these things. They know what I'm talking about. But it's frustrating because once you get sort of out of this kind of sort of higher tier artist, unless some people are really knowledgeable, it can become very challenging to execute on these other things. And then when you do, people don't necessarily appreciate it because they don't understand the value that you bring to the table. So
I doesn't ask you, if you're not able to afford to, let's say you're an independent manager and you've got very modest budgets, you don't have all these hires around you like digital experts, what resources do you go to get yourself into at least the frame of mind of a skill set to where you essentially called bullshit on the agency, right? So you said, hey, that data is not like, it's great on paper, surface level, but it's not, when you dig down, it's not real. So how does a young independent or just independent manager that doesn't have those kind of resources to hire someone to do that, do it on their own or learn the skill sets to do it?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of the platforms have, they've got a number of resources that you can rely on to go to, right? So, I work with Pandora. Pandora's got like a great set of tools. And actually, let me also break this part down too, just because there's a number of different things here, right? Like there's the stuff on the ad side. And I'm not going to front. That can be kind of complicated. You got to really dig into it. Again, Indiepreneur does a great job. And they've got like great classes and stuff like that, where they can sort of teach you about, building and managing and running ad campaigns. On the DSP side, I sort of break it apart between platforms that give you tools to do stuff on your own and platforms that, you just got to know somebody. Right. So the key platforms that give you tools, again, these, strictly thinking about DSPs, it's Pandora with the artist marketing platform, AMP, and they allow artists to do audio messages that they can play to their fans. You can drive traffic to places, do featured tracks where you boost the spins on your track. So Pandora, I think about Spotify with respect to things like artist picks, so you can feature a track, an album, a playlist. You can upload Canvas, so you have animations to go along with it. You can run pre-save campaigns. You can work with other artists who are collaborators and get them to do artist pick and drive traffic, right? So there's that kind of stuff you can do. YouTube, there's obviously lots of things that you can do on, with YouTube on your own, but YouTube is a platform that I rely heavily on. I work with a company called Quarter Lab that helps me a lot because, quite frankly, YouTube can be a bit complicated, but is a huge resource. And then the others, which are, and all of those places have really good learning centers. So if you've got no budget, they've got really good learning centers that allow you to go in, watch videos, read case studies, and that kind of thing. So like if your budget is zero, my suggestion is go and look at those kinds of things. And then to the extent that, for the other platforms where you kind of got to know somebody, that's where you got to rely on the distributor, especially if you're a smaller guy, but even then you need to be able to say, hey, CD Baby, DistroKid, TuneCore, whomever it is, look at the success that I'm having and here are the things that I'm doing, and updating them so that they can reach out to the DSPs. Like you and I are fortunate, right? We're in positions where we know people at these places and we can make the phone calls and find out about marketing opportunities and so forth. But everybody isn't in that position. In that case, you do have to rely on your distributor, but keeping them up to up to date, up to speed on the things that you've got going on is hugely important. And if you do that, then you'll start finding, I think you'll end up starting to find some success. Makes sense?
Do you think that, yeah, that makes sense. Do you think from your perspective that success meaning success metric of streams and penetration of music, just the path to success, can it just be as easy with a DistroKid, TuneCore distributor versus a label? Or do you think the goal should always be to eventually transition into where you can have this team working on your stuff?
No, not definitely, not necessarily. There are definitely artists who are, using those, the DIY distribution companies, aggregators, and finding great success and making, some of them are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. But they've found a way to be able to do those things, where they are able to connect with their fans and they've been able to make some kind of a connection so that they're generating that kind of revenue. It doesn't necessarily, it's not required, but it certainly can make things easier when you have that. But
Mhm.
yeah, like if you're on one of these DIY distribution platforms, if you start having real success, you really stand out way above the most of the people who are on the platform. You're definitely above 99% of your other people using the platform. So when they're having the conversations, when their commerce team is having the conversation with the DSP, you're not competing for attention with Drake, right? I suspect that Drake just put out a new single. If you're Universal in commerce, that's the record you're talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So does the DIY artist who has a little bit of success, because most of the artists have little, there's not much there. If you start to get a little bit of traction, it becomes a great story for those companies to have the DSPs.
I see somebody's in our chat from Twitch. I think it was Twitch for Musicians, but you and I talked a little bit about Twitch. It's interesting. So just to give you like why I think Bryan is the smartest guy in the room. Years ago, when I was in the festival space, I got to know a guy that had started a platform called Justin TV, and I kind of lost track with him, because I think he shut it down. And then he went on to create like a video gaming platform, which was Justin Con, which was Twitch, right? So I lost track of him, but Bryan stayed stayed next to it, and obviously was really one of the first executives that I really knew of that was like, you really need to look at this platform. It's going to be more than gaming. It's going to be bigger than gaming. And then Amazon acquisition, and here we are. So I'd love to just get your thoughts about Twitch, because you literally were the first person to get to have a non-gaming conversation with me about that platform. And now we're seeing it out there, making some really interesting key hires, with COVID, Questlove, which I think you've been a big part of his success on the platform. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting. And I'll say this, I believe right now that if you look at, sort of like the use and the penetration of platforms like, YouTube and Spotify and so forth, there's still room for them to grow, for sure. But I think that the biggest gap in terms of what the opportunity is from what the potential is from where the platform is right now is with Twitch, right? There's, I think the opportunity is absolutely gigantic, and it's been fun working with the platform and working, with the team over there, and fortunately having artists who are open to working on it. So one of the things that happened, so yes, as you mentioned, Questlove, the Roots are a client of mine, and when quarantine started, Questlove wanted to start doing DJ sets, and he was like, "Oh, let's do this on, we'll do it on Instagram and YouTube." And I was like, "Well, hey, let's if we're gonna do it there, let's put it everywhere. Let's put it on Facebook. Let's put it on Periscope, Twitter, and let's put it on Twitch." And so we started, multicasting, simulcasting on all of the platforms. And what was crazy was that depending on the night and stuff like that, and if we get any kind of feature and stuff like that, but like the numbers on Twitch can be the biggest in terms of the number of concurrents, the number of uniques, and even time spent watching. And it's it's going to continue to grow. I think that there's really challenges just because it's arguably the most complicated of all the platforms to use. So even if you go in as a user, it can be overwhelming looking at all of the images and the things on the screen. It's just, there's so much going on, and I know that the gaming community loves it. But I think that when more artists start to figure out how they can really make money on it, because look, the way you make money on it, and I think most people know this, is through tips essentially, right? So, and there's a number of different ways that people can tip and give money to the artists that they choose. But there are, and they've shared a number of examples with me where you have people creating unique experiences and engaging with the fans. So it's really an engagement platform more than a live streaming platform. It's live, but it's really about the engagement that you have. And the more you engage with people, the better it is. And, there are artists like producers who are going in and deconstructing beats and talking about gear and equipment. And there are people who are getting, $50, $500, $1,000 tips from people. And so I think the opportunity for generating revenue from it is huge, because they will help find, that, you're talking about the funnel, right? How do you find, the truth, the core fans? You don't need to have a huge following on Twitch. You just need to have an engaged audience that is open to tipping. And, you can, because it's, it's part of Amazon. One of the really cool things that you can do is, as an Amazon Prime member, and what is it, like 150 million Prime members in the world now, something crazy like that. If you're a Prime member, you get $5 that you can give to the creator of your choice on Twitch. And so it doesn't cost you anything, but the creator gets paid. So leveraging things like that are great ways to get money into the pockets of the artist. But I think there's still a lot to learn. You know what I mean? And the artist community still has a whole lot to learn about it. But
and that's the one thing for me, like the fact that Amazon owns Twitch, and I think Amazon in a way, is one of the most powerful, obviously high market valuation, but they have everybody's. When I say everybody, I don't know about everyone watching's household, but I mean the UPS person's constantly at the house right now, dropping off Amazon boxes. So it's like, if you have everybody's credit card information, what their purchasing behaviors are, which means that you can easily break down to the psychographic part, right? I can, if you buy these products, I know where you're at in your life. I know the other things you may be into. You can easily serve up, you may like this content as well. And I just think that their path to being able to blow those doors open is pretty fascinating. It's the one thing that YouTube's great, but YouTube didn't have that, right? YouTube wasn't shipping stuff to people's houses, as the backbone of a content business.
Yeah. Look, I also say, look, it's been interesting, like comparing the streams, right? Because I've been, I get a report every week where I'm able to look across like all of the streaming platforms. So it's the exact same program on all 5 platforms that we're on, and I'm able to compare them. So it's been pretty interesting because, it's YouTube and Twitch are generally the ones that have the longest time spent listening or watching, viewing. But, it doesn't mean that, Periscope isn't valuable. It is. It doesn't mean that, Instagram, it's a different experience on Instagram. You don't have the same level of, resolution. It's not, it's not in HD like some of the other stuff. And and you're capturing people where they are, which I think is a key thing. We might need to see, we've got to get Corey Henry going on.
Yeah. Well, he's actually on there as a gamer. And now our thing is just transitioning him into putting up more performance content on there. I mean, we've done some broadcasts, but not like Twitch specific things. More interesting enough, my background, obviously coming out of Superfly, we are the co-founders of Bonnaroo, but as well as Outside Lands. So next weekend, they're doing inside lands, where they're going to be broadcasting archival content from the show, and Twitch is the exclusive partner on that.
I saw that. That's really big, man. That's really cool. Speaking of some of my favorite memories, man, hanging out at Outside Lands with you too, man. It's just always fun. Just like looking at that sea of people and in the cabana, and just like it's just always just such a great vibe, man. Always had so much fun. Always have fun.
Yeah, I call the Friday of Outside Lands. I always used to say it's the most unproductive day in technology, because like every developer, every C-level executive, every, they're all that Friday before the festival. Either they're at the park or they're at somebody's house at a pre-party. But there's not a lot of coding getting done on the Friday of outside links, that's for sure. You know?
That's right, man. You know, I wanted to actually ask you about something too, and it was in your bio, and of course, you and I have talked about this, you know, extensively, but it would be great if you could share a little bit more about the thought process about going out onto your own and you know, and starting this new venture, specifically around the idea of being able to be more inclusive. As look, as the world has, you know, the country's been on fire for the past few months with respect to looking at social justice initiatives and social justice issues. You know, our industry is also plagued with problems and inequities. Could you talk a little bit about, because that's very bold of you to step out from something that, you know, so well established and such a big brand in the space. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your thought process and where you see it going.
Yeah, you know, so when I talked about where we first met, and then we used to see each other at South by Southwest, and these kind of heavy tech, brainy, really strategic, you know, meetings and or, you know, panels. And, you know, one of the reasons why I gravitated towards Bryan, and I think gravitated was me, because we were often the only people of color in those rooms. And as you're going through your career as a young executive, you start to really more think that I'm navigating this well. And I always say that I got to where I'm at in life on the shoulders of people that didn't look like me, but they saw something in me and helped open up their resources, relationships, and knowledge base to allow me to grow as an executive. So you start to think, well, I'm doing a really great job of navigating this. And the conversations you have with your friends that look like you are more of like, how are you navigating this so well? What are some of the tips and tricks of how you're able to navigate and advance? And then as you get into higher altitudes in the industry, you start to say to yourself, you know, instead of like, I guess that's the way it is, I think I know why it is. And for me, there was a lot of reasons that kind of went around me leaving Red Light and starting Culture Collective. But one of the moments I think about that actually I haven't talked publicly about was I was sitting, so when I first started my career, I was hired not shortly after college, I was hired to come to New York and work at CBS Radio for David Goodman and John Sykes. And John Sykes was at that time CEO of CBS, and you know, he was taking the 180 radio stations and doing a lot of really interesting things with them. And you know, John has a marketer's mind, and he's always say, we're in the music business, we need to put more pictures of artists up on our walls because we're in the music business. You know, we're radio, but it's music. And so I joined his team, and that's what really was one of the kind of major things that happened in my life that got me to where I'm at, right? It got me to New York. It got me working in big business. It got me, you know, getting to know really high level executives. And a couple of years ago, John and Tom Pullman were being honored by UJA. And they were doing a kickoff brunch at the Soho House here in Los Angeles. And the kickoff brunch was only for a handful of executives, maybe like, you know, probably 25 to 30 executives. And it was the who's who in the room. So it was, you know, the head of this company, the head of that company, the founder of this, the founder of that. And he, you know, John, who essentially I credit with helping to start my career, was being honored. And I looked around the room, and I was maybe one of 4 executives, Black executives in that room. And of the 4 of us, none of us actually owned our company that we worked for. Everybody was there on behalf of somebody else that they were working for. And it was just one of these things where I was like, I started my career. John has a lot to do with it. You know, this is as high level of a room as it's going to get, right? There's no other room above this one, right? So if this is as high of a level it's going to get, this is as diverse as it gets. And I started to really think about, you know, in order to sometimes impact change, you have to have accountability, responsibility, and authority, right? And those are sometimes the 3 things that are the most difficult things to achieve in a job. Sometimes you maybe have one of one of three or two of three, but having accountability, responsibility, and authority, often that really doesn't really come to life unless you own your own company. So I wanted to create a firm that where diversity and inclusion is a big way of how we think about how we hire, who we work with, and who we are as people. And not that it couldn't have happened at another company or companies that I was working for, but ultimately I thought it was important that it would be my narrative, it'd be my story, my message. I needed to do this on my own versus, well, I had to partner with somebody to do it. I wanted it to be my narrative. And it wasn't an easy decision, especially, where I'm at in my life. I'm like Bryan, I've got small children and other things to think about. So you say to yourself, this is a pretty big move and you got to do it right. And so it took a lot of thinking, a lot of planning, looking for the right pitch, as I like to say. In baseball, it never comes. And sometimes you just have to swing and know that you believe in yourself enough to make it successful. So, they always say the first year of your business is the hardest. I guess the first year of business for me was wildly successful. And the second year of business with COVID is going to be the hardest as an entrepreneur, right? But the more fascinating thing is that a year later, I've gotten phone calls from I've had conversations with people at companies I've worked with along my whole career that I've reached out to say, hey, I now recognize, more understand, or I want to learn more about why you did what you did, right? Because a year ago I was talking about diversity and inclusion doesn't exist enough in our business, and I want to be an example of someone of color that could have easily continued my career working for other companies and building their brands, and I wanted to create my own thing, but had a message behind it, and people understanding now why that is, and all the work that still needs to be done to make that better in our industry.
Yeah. So something that I find now is that in addition to all of the jobs that we have, strategist, therapist, advisor, whatever it is, the new on the list is D&I consultant, right? D&I executive. And and this isn't, I think, just for you and me, but it's Black executives, in all types of industries. Black Tuesday happened, a little over 2 months ago, and then there was an article that came out, I believe it was in Rolling Stone, where they were saying, there hasn't really been any meaningful change. And I wanted to look, you've been talking about this. I think you and I have been talking about this and working in this space and trying to be advocates and, for a while. Are you seeing more on the inside any like meaningful change or initiatives to sort of help combat these issues?
It's a good question. I think it's interesting seeing the whole sociological development of this, because I think with Blackout Tuesday and with Juneteenth, which was the more interesting one, that you found companies in our industry that just didn't want to be on the wrong side of the conversation, right? So to them, it was like, let's take the day off on Tuesday. Let's put the Black, image up on our social platforms, and let's take Juneteenth off, and let's cut checks to color or change, and maybe that'll just at least alleviate some heat coming our way. Because when you start to really look under the hood at a lot of the companies, there's a lot of issues, right? And I almost would rather, I in a weird way, I appreciate people in life that are blatant about their feelings and positions on things such as diversity and inclusion versus masking themselves as a supporter or a believer in it just to not be on the wrong side of the conversation, right? If on Friday you're saying, company, we're going to be taking Juneteenth off in recognition of the movement. We're also going to be, cutting significant checks to different social justice organizations. But on Monday morning, we're going to hire how we hire. We're going to think how we think, right? We're going to promote how we promote, knowing that we're not the problem because we're part of the solution because we did those things on Friday. That's more hurtful, right?
Yeah.
That's more hurtful to movement.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. One of the things that I've seen that I'm not sure that it's fair to say that nothing has happened in the past 2 months. I can speak, look, I've certainly, from the inside working with Pandora and Sirius XM, they've made not only, I think they've made some very serious commitments to the staff and their and stakeholders to make some fundamental changes. And I'm seeing that when talking with people at other media companies, other Black executives at other media companies. And that to me is encouraging, because not only have some of them said this, and a lot of them aren't necessarily doing, or at least some of what I've seen hasn't been, oh, let's get the Variety article about the stuff that we're doing, right? But they're doing, but more importantly, there's a few people in the rooms like you and me that are working with the executives to try to hold them accountable to the things that they've said. It's like, hey, you said this 2 months ago, where are we? Where are we with respect to, making changes with respect to hiring, or getting the D&I executive, or making contributions to the communities from where these artists come from? Because look, I mean, we talk about hip hop being the biggest genre, the biggest genre. And one of the things that is frustrating, and I'm sure you've heard me say this before, it's like, you see on one end, you see the, music being created by Black artists, and then on the other end, it's being consumed by Black consumers and setting trends and driving culture. But like all along the way in the middle, man, there's not a lot of Black people in positions to make decisions and help position the artist and the art that is culturally on point or sensitive. So the more of us that we can have in the middle to help facilitate that, the better. But also, if you're Black, you don't have to just do hip hop, right? You don't have to just do R&B. And I think that's something that a lot of executives we're still dealing with. But anyway,
there's a great article. There's a Billboard article this week about Blacks in country music, and there's actually somebody that I have done some work with in the past, who is one of the very few Black, if only Black executives at RCA working on country music. And and this was last year, he and I were having these conversations just about how he was navigating it. Mm-hmm. And and I agree with you that we one of the things that we'll know change is happening is when you see the complexion of rooms diversify around other genres, right? We're a while away from there, but a lot of that comes to the companies, right? There's a lot of companies out there that think, all right, well, we're going to be doing a meeting with a Black artist, so let's just pull some Black folks into the room so we can help get the deal done. So they can say, all right, well, we're diversified, and so I agree with you. I think just one of the things I've been unpacking around D&I and these companies as well is that I'm not convinced that chairperson at company A, right, who's been there, chairperson's been there for 10 years, and they're probably 5 to 10 years away from hanging it all up and retiring. How much do they really want to shake up the things that they need to correct, right? That's why I think compensation is something that a lot of these companies, especially the bigger companies, need to look at. Diversity and inclusion should be tied to executive comp. And if you don't hit these metrics or these goals, that impacts your compensation. At the end of the day, if a company says, we're gonna, and I'm using Live Nation as an example. I don't know this for a fact of whether or not the goals that Michael Rapinoe's talked about are tied to compensation. But ultimately, if they don't hit those goals of diversity on the board that he's publicly talked about, diversity of vendors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what is the implication if they don't get to it, right? Yeah. Typically, it's we'll try harder next year, and that's not going to work.
That's right. I agree. And we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to make sure that we got into a little bit of forecasting. So you've already mentioned, sort of like what you think about 2021 and like coming back with respect to live performances. I mean, you've always ever since I know you've had a lot of foresight, and I'd really, so pre-COVID, we're in the middle of COVID. Give me a little bit more insight of what you think the post-COVID world looks like. I mean, you already mentioned the artists who have the ability to use this time to build their connections or maintain and grow their connections with fans. When the world opens back up, they'll be able to go to those people, which is a really smart way to think about it. What do you think the future really holds? I mean, like, will touring ever be the same as it was? Will festival going ever be the same as it was? Just what are your thoughts in general about that?
Yeah, I think that from a touring perspective, I predict that in the touring is I had a conversation with I fly a lot. American Airlines called me yesterday saying they're kind of like, hey, just checking in, because I haven't flown in 3 months. So they called me, and I was talking to the person. He said, well, we're in Dallas, Texas, and they're starting to do shows here. And I said, well, understand that there's doing shows in a local market and there's doing a tour efficiently. And that's that whole Swiss cheese tour of like not being able to play adjacent markets and really build a P&L to where you come out on the back end of the tour profitable. Those are going to be hard to come by in the United States until end of next year. And I'm pretty convinced of that. Will shows happen, especially going into 2021? Yes. Will a 35, 50 date US tour happen? I don't know, because one of the challenges with this virus is that, we can isolate it. We can isolate certain cases, or regions, but we're not locking down state borders. So at any point in time, it's just the way the virus works, right? So I don't see that happening in the US till late next year, where you can really put together a large scale, efficient tour. However, I do see the possibilities of it happening overseas. I do see the possibilities of us being able to I have some dates on hold for an artist in Japan in April, along with Australia and New Zealand. I think those are possible. I mean, New Zealand's having a really, really great run right as of recent with the virus. And so now the bigger question is, will we be able to go to those places?
I was literally just about to say that, though, because I have a friend who was contemplating going there, and he can go, but he and his family would have to live in a hotel for 14 days as soon as they land. Like, you get off the plane and they take you straight to a hotel, and you have to stay there quarantined in a hotel room for 14 days. So, yeah. And it's going to be like $7,000 in addition to it. So do you have 14 days to live in a hotel room?
Yeah. And that's the tough thing about it. Like, my mindset is that also the artists that can perform in more, let's call it 500 to 1,000 cap rooms, where you can do mitigation in those rooms. You can do 50% capacity, 2 shows a night. Maybe the shows are shorter. They're 1 hour and 15, right? A show. We'll have the ability to be able to maybe go to Japan and sit for a couple weeks or a week. Testing may change that, right? The ability to be able to have ubiquitous testing, and you can land, you can test before you go, test when you arrive, wait 3 days, test again, do your show. So maybe it's more like a week, but those artists that can sit in Japan and say, all right, we're going to do 7 days of shows, and then move on to the next market. That could become a thing. But I mean, I have one artist I talked to the other day that's thinking through, do I go and do a fellowship program with a university in Europe, so at least I can be in Europe when the world comes back on board, and I can easily travel in and out of that European city versus the United States. My wife, who's Costa Rican, we're trying to get back to Costa Rica so she can see her father. You wouldn't believe the paperwork we're going through right now, so I can go with her, or the kids can go with her. She carries a passport, so she's able to go to and from. But it's been difficult. So that's the one thing that I don't know how it's going to shake out. But I really do feel that touring is not going to come back in a large scale well towards the end of next year. But that being said, every artist has really got to look at their own business and think about how they can really build it and reimagine it through digital means. And that's through the things that we've been talking to today. How are you monetizing Twitch? How are you monetizing merchandise, which I think that every artist really needs to rethink. I mean, everyone sells merch, but every artist should be really thinking about seasonal merch, right? There should be a winter season of merch versus a spring season of merch, and really double down on a merch concept. But most importantly, to your point earlier, utilizing data to make sure you can efficiently market to those folks that are in the funnel, right? That are your core.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to see if we can, there's a few questions in the chat. There's a lot of stuff in there. I'm trying to parse it out. So Jonathan, I don't know if you see some stuff in there you want to answer. I'll answer one real quick while you're looking. So someone asked about the resources and the services for Pandora and Spotify and the others. So yeah, Pandora has something called the Artist Marketing Platform, AMP for short, and the website is ampplaybook.com. So you can check that out, and there's a lot of information there. Spotify has Spotify for Artists, and YouTube has got the Creators Studio. So there's really some great information there. Apple has Apple Music for Artists, and you can get an account and be able to look at your data there as well. And then there's some other platforms where you can sort of like look at data and analytics like Chartmetric and Next Big Sound and stuff, where you can sort of look at data as well. But in terms of being able to take action, I think the sort of like the key ones are Pandora, Spotify, YouTube.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And one of the questions here was talking about just audience segment. Are you seeing? I'd be curious. And I think we got to wrap up after this. But do you see a younger demographic when you're doing things on a Twitch versus a more traditional platform?
So that's a really interesting question. So that is kind of what I assumed was going to be the case when we started using Twitch. And look, the Roots, Questlove, these guys are mid late 40s, right? So we were like, I don't know how it's going to go. And one of the things really funny is when we first started on Twitch, Amir said during one of the streams, he said, oh man, we were like sending messages to him, like while he's like, oh man, there's like 10,000 people watching you right now on Twitch. He's like, oh geez. He's like, well, isn't everybody on Twitch 13 or something like that, right? Like laughing about it. And then the comment field was just filled with people like, oh, I'm 35 or I'm 42 or whatever. And so it got filled with stuff. And, and then kind of like going back and speaking with the team there, we found out that while there is certainly a vibrant young gaming audience, there are also a lot more people that are older that are on the platform as well.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty
great. What I believe it's 12:05. Tom, are we can go. Bryan, by the way, we can easily go for another hour.
I know.
You know that.
Well, listen, I know I could, and I think many of our audience would also benefit from hearing the wisdom that you guys are sharing. And unfortunately, we are out of time. And I want to say on behalf of the audience, thank you for, number one, your time today and the wisdom that you've shared. And simply thank you for just being incredibly great guys in the music industry. You are, as Jim Griffin said in the chat, both CEO material. And you sort of are CEOs of your current enterprises, but what Jim is really saying is CEOs of very large enterprises. You are the kind of executive that many of us in the industry aspire to be more like. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Actually, let me just say one thing too real quick is, with respect to the D&I stuff, and I meant to say this earlier, but my friend Kathy Baker and I and a few other sort of Black digital executives have gotten together, and we've got a pretty good list of people. So to the extent people are looking for, oh shit, are we out?
No, we're good.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Good.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not the Grammys.
Yeah. Oh, the walk-off music.
Good job.
To the extent that people are looking for some digital marketing executives or agencies to work with, I've got a pretty nice pool of people that that we can go to. So you can get in touch with me or Tom. You can get me on any socials, LinkedIn. I'm Bryan Calhoun at pretty much everything.
Well, guys, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be in the industry with you all, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in person sometime soon at a big live music event. And Jonathan, I hope
Yes.
you're wrong. I hope it's not late next year. Although
I hope I am too. I'll be happily wrong. That's for
Right.
sure. Hey, here's what we'll do. I'll buy drinks, Tom.
hey, listen, I'd lick the floors of the Marathon Music Works right now to see a show in here tonight. I would.
Yeah.
But folks, next Tuesday, I am thrilled to present two more rock stars in their own rights, joining us as our guests on the Smartest People in the Room, Deborah Manus Gardner and Kevin Cassini. Deborah is the queen of clearances, and she's going to share some of her wisdom about how she has helped create some of the most incredible mashups in the music industry. Kevin is an attorney in the industry, and I promise you, you're going to want to sit in on this one. It's going to be great. Meanwhile, folks, let me echo what I said at the top of the show, and that is wear one of these. It's a mask, okay? You can find them anywhere, and the sooner you wear one of these everywhere you go outside, the sooner we all will be back in live music rooms soon. So there. Thank you very much. Stay safe and healthy, and we will see you on the flip side.
Thank you.
Thank you.